Guys, welcome to day 8. It's crazy, it's third week. Um, and yeah, it's getting nuts. I'm starting to feel like I'm going nuts, but I'm doing lots of stuff to keep busy, playing a lot of the piano and reading a lot of video games, talking on the phone. I think I've spent more time on the phone than anything else this weekend, that is for sure. Um, what did you guys do this weekend? Um, Comment below and tell me what you did this weekend. That'd be cool. Real quick, I'm going to go through the day 8 lesson plans with you. The thought of the day that I was thinking about as I was doing my workout this weekend was the higher the climb, the better the view. So what that means is that the harder that you work out, the more work you put into something, the more time and energy that you put into, like, say, your education or something, a skill that you're working on, the more reward there is. So if you think about like hiking, you go to the top of a mountain, that view is awesome. And it's so much better at the top than it is like the midpoint or even at the base of the mountain, right? So my question for you is, what are you doing to challenge yourself today? Are you picking up a new hobby? Are you doing something that's particularly challenging physically, maybe mentally? For me, it's learning a new piece on the piano, and I've been working through a Disney book that I have, a classical Disney book, um, a lot like the piano music that we listen to in class. So uh, that's what I'm doing to challenge myself. And then also I'm doing my daily workouts and that kind of stuff, and practicing some new yoga, doing that kind of stuff. So huge shout out to everybody that did the survey, especially your parents. That was awesome. I got a lot of really good feedback, and I'm using that data to make your lesson plans and that stuff. So um, today was an exception, but please expect the lessons to come much sooner. This morning I had a ton of meetings to attend, and I just had a lot of stuff going. So um, from now on, I'll get those lesson plans to you before 10 a.m. every morning. So you don't have to email me and say, when is the lesson plans going to cut? They'll be there before 10 a.m. Okay. Um, Heads up, Jarrett is the leader in Prodigy. So someone's got to get on there and challenge that kid. Way to go, Jarrett. This is like week 2 in the running. So good job. So the new assignment on Prodigy that I've given you is the greatest common factor. I even put the math standard in there. It's 6.ns.b.4. And then it kind of gives you, so remember we talked about standards in class and how my job is to make sure that I'm teaching you those standards. So this is the one that we're going to focus on for the next couple of weeks. It's a really difficult skill for a lot of people. So but it makes your job a lot easier as you get through algebra, and when we start learning about negative numbers, it's going to make your life a lot easier. So just practice that skill, do Prodigy. I would say do Prodigy 10 to 15 minutes a day at minimum. If you can, do more, but don't burn yourself out. Pace yourself, because we've got a long time to go, right? This is week 3 out of 6, so we've still got another 3 weeks, and I need you to be on that Prodigy, okay? And I don't want you to hate it when we're done with it. So I did post on your OneNote the 3-6. I really, really, really need you guys to tell me what you need help on, or if you need help. Saying I don't get it or this doesn't make sense to me, please help, doesn't help me understand what you're not understanding. So I need really specific questions. For example, I'm really struggling with number 2 on the homework section of 3-6. Can you please explain that to me? That's a good question. Looking at and saying, like, I didn't understand how to graph number 2 on the remembering, or can you check my answer? Those are good questions, and I can help with those. Right? I can send resources with those. But when you say, please help, and I don't get it, that means that I have to go in and make sure and dig deeper at you, like, well, what exactly don't you understand? So just keep that in mind as you're moving forward. Oh yeah, so I forgot to mention that. So I had originally scheduled the Zoom meeting for tomorrow at 11, but that's like what time the lunches are being served for those of you that like to get out and get lunches and stuff. So I need to change that to 1:30. And so I put it in your calendars. Everybody go into your email and check your calendar. It's scheduled for tomorrow at 1:30. I'm also interested to see how many of you are actually using that Outlook calendar. I think you guys can see when I'm available and when I'm busy and that kind of stuff just by looking at my calendar here. Because I've got a Zoom meeting with you guys tomorrow and then a Zoom meeting with my principals and my teammates on Wednesday. So I won't be available for my office hours during that time. Let's see. Listening. I'm going to read some of this today. I'm not going to do too much because I don't want to bore you guys, but it is getting to the good part of the story, and I think you guys are really going to like it. So for reading, I want to get into ReadWorks, and I've got some assignments ready to go on ReadWorks, but I don't want to overwhelm you guys with too much to do. We are going to start where we left off in Journeys, which is lesson 14. We read through it together. I want you to do a second reading today, and then I would like to schedule a time where we can do like a second read together, and I can ask the questions that I need to do. Maybe we can do that on the Zoom chat on like Wednesday or Thursday or something like that. So we'll talk about it tomorrow. Review your vocabulary. I already assigned this vocabulary, this spelling and this vocabulary on Spelling City, and so you guys have already done this, so I'm just gonna not do any Spelling City, but I do need you to do the reader's notebook, pages 183 through 185, and that will help you. Yeah. So also, we need to get back into our figurative language studies. We left off, we did metaphors, and we did similes, and we did idioms, and so now we need to do, what was it that I assigned today? Some hyperboles, an extreme exaggeration. Actually, I think we did this one in class as well, but this will be a really good review for you. So, yeah. Okay, writing. Here's a big one. We don't have much time to do argumentative writing. We did a little bit of it at the beginning of the year where we talked about like claims and reasons and opinion versus fact, and when we were reading The Giver, and we talked about soda taxes. I would like to get into that more with our genetics unit that's coming up. So in which I want to start probably sometime tomorrow. I'm just not sure how I'm going to do it. It's hard to teach science remotely, so we'll see how that goes. Social studies, everything is the same. Also, I gave you guys those CERT packets, Miss Williams, and I gave you that CERT packet. Look through those. Those are really, really good. There was Pompeo. That's an excellent one to do. I used to do those with my sixth graders 5 years ago, and they're fun. And they're scripted, and it's fun, and you can even get your friends on it to Zoom and do the reader's theater. So yeah, my physical challenge to you is to run a mile today. How fast can you do it? My mile time is not very good, so I'm not going to say what my mile time is, but and then finally go on and watch the 10 minutes of your news today. See how that goes. All right, so I'm going to read this to you. I'm only going to do a couple of pages today. I'm not going to finish the chapter because this is such a long chapter. These tiny little words. So, here we go. I never knew what to expect from old Dan. I never saw a coonhound so determined or one that could get into so many predicaments. More than one time, it would have been the death of him if it hadn't been for smart little Ann. One night, not long after I entered the bottoms, my dogs struck the trail of an old boar coon. He was a smart old fellow and had a sack full of tricks. He crossed the river time after time. Finally, swimming to the middle and staying in the swift current, he swam downstream. Knowing he would have to come out somewhere, my dogs split up. Old Dan took the right, and Little Ann took the left. I came out from the bottoms into the gravel bar and stood and watched them in the moonlight. Little Ann worked downriver, and then she came up. I saw her when she passed me, going up the bank, sniffing and searching for the trail. She came back to me. I patted her head, scratched her ears, and talked to her. She kept staring across the river to where old Dan was searching for the trail. She waded in and swam across to help him. I knew that the coon had not come out of the river on her side. If he had, she would have found the trail. I walked up to the rifle, pulled off my shoes, and waded across. My dogs worked the riverbanks, up and down. They circled far and out into the bottoms. I could hear the loud snuffing of old Dan. He was bewildered and mad. I was getting the thrill from it all, and as I had never seen them fooled like this. Old Dan gave up on his side, piled into the river, and swam across to the side little Ann had worked on. I knew that it was useless for him to do that. I was on the point of giving up, calling them to me, and going elsewhere to hunt. When I heard the bawl of little Ann, I couldn't believe what I heard. She wasn't bawling on the trail, she was sounding the tree bark. I hurried down the bank. There was a loud splash. I saw old Dan swimming back. By this time, little Ann was really singing a song. In the bright moonlight, I could see old Dan clearly. His powerful legs were churning the water. When I saw a sight that makes a hunter's heart swell with pride. Still swimming, old Dan raised his head high out in the water and bawled. He couldn't wait until he reached the bank to tell little Ann he was coming. From far out of the river, he told her. Reaching the shallows, he plowed out of the river onto a sandbar. Not even taking time to shake the water from his body, again he raised his head and bawled and tore out down the bank. In a trot, I followed, whooping to let them know I was coming. Before I reached the tree, old Dan's deep voice was making the timber shake. The tree was a large birch, standing right on the riverbank. The swift current had eaten away at the footing, causing it to lean. The lower branches of the tree dangled to the water. I saw how the smart coon had pulled this trick. Coming in toward the bank from the midstream, he had caught in the dangling limbs and climbed up. Exhausted from the long swim, he stayed there in the birch, thinking he had outsmarted my dogs. I couldn't understand how little Ann had found him. It was impossible to follow the tree toward the bottoms. It was too much off balance. I did the next best thing. I cut a long elder switch. Unbuckling one of the suspenders, I tied it to the end and climbed the tree. The coon was sitting in the fork of the limb. Taking my switch, I whopped him a good one, and out he came. He sailed out over the river. With a loud splash, he hit the water and swam for the other side. My dogs jumped off the bank after him. They were no match against the expert swimming. On reaching the other bank, he ran downriver. Climbing down out of the tree, I picked up my axe and lantern and trotted down to another rifle and waded across. I could tell by the bawling of the dogs that they were close to the coon. He would have to climb a tree or be caught on the ground. All at once, their voices stopped. I stood still and waited for them to bawl treed. Nothing happened. Thinking the coon had taken to the river again, I waited to give them time to reach the opposite bank. I waited and waited. I could hear nothing. By then, I knew that he had not crossed over. I thought perhaps they had caught him on the ground. I hurried on. I came to a point where a slough of crystal clear water ran into the river. On the other side was a bluff. I could hear one of the dogs over there. As I watched and waited, I heard a dog jump in the water. It was little Ann. She swam across and came up to me, staying with me for just a second. She jumped in and swam back to the other side. I could hear her sniffing and whining. I couldn't figure out where old Dan was. By squatting down and holding my lantern high over my head, I could dimly see the opposite bank. Little Ann was running up and down. I noticed she always stayed in the one place of about 25 yards, never leaving the small area. She ran down the water's edge and stared out into the slough. A horrible thought came that old Dan had drowned. I knew a big coon was capable of drowning a dog in water by climbing in onto his head and forcing him under. As fast as I could run, I circled the slough and climbed up over the bluff and came down to where little Ann was. She was hysterical, running up and down the bank and whining. I tied my lantern on a long pole, held it over the water, and looked for old Dan's body. I couldn't see clearly in the clear spring waters, but I couldn't see my dog anywhere. I sat down on the bank, buried my face in my hands, and cried. I was sure he was gone. Several minutes had passed, and all the time little Ann had never stopped. Running here and there along the bank, she kept sniffing and whining. I heard when she started digging. I looked around. She was 10 feet from the water's edge. I got up and went over to her. She was digging in a small hole the size of a big apple. It was the air hole for a muskrat den. I pulled little Ann away from the hole, knelt down, and put my ear to it. I could hear something and feel a vibration in the ground. It was an eerie sound that seemed to be coming from far away. Listening, finally, I understood what the noise was. It was the voice of old Dan. Little Ann had opened the hole up enough for her digging so his voice could be heard faintly. In some way, he had gotten into the old muskrat den. I knew that down under the bank in the water, the entrance to the dam could not be found. Rolling up my sleeve, I tried to find it with my hand. I had no luck. It was too far down. There was only one thing to do. Leaving my axe and lantern, I ran for home, picking up a long-handled shovel. I hurried back. The sun was high in the sky before I dug old Dan out. He was a sight to see, nothing but mud from tip of his nose to the end of his tail. I held on to his collar and led him down to the river to wash him off. The water was much warmer than the cold spring water of the slough. After washing him, I turned him loose. Right back to the hole he ran. Little Ann was already digging. I knew the coon was still there. Working together, we dug him out. After the coon was killed, I saw what had made him so smart. His right front foot was twisted and shriveled. At one time, he must have been caught in a trap and then had to pull himself free. He was an old coon. His face was almost white. He was a very big and heavy and beautiful fur. He was big and heavy and had beautiful fur. Tired, muddy, wet, and hungry, I started for home. I've often wondered how old Dan got into that muskrat den. Perhaps there was another entrance I'd overlooked. I'll never know. One night, far back in the mountains, in a place called the Cyclone Timber, old Dan really put himself in a good one. Many years before my time, a terrible cyclone had ripped its way through the mountains, leaving a scar in the form of fallen timber, twisted and gnarled. The path of the cyclone was several miles wide and several miles long. It was wonderful place to hide. Let me try that again. It was wonderful place to hunt as it abandoned with game. My dogs had struck the trail of coon about an hour before. They had really been warming him up. I knew it was about time for him to take up a tree, and sure enough, I heard the deep voice of old Dan telling the world that he had a coon up a tree. I'm going to stop there. That is fun. All right, so there's only about 2 more pages of this chapter left. Anyways, it's going to start getting good. This is a good book. All right, guys. Have a good Monday, and I'll talk to you in the morning.